Somewhere in your home, right now, there is a wonky shelf. You built it. It leans very slightly to the left. One screw went in at an angle you'd rather not talk about. And if you put a full mug of tea on the end, it does a little wobble that makes everyone in the room hold their breath. And here's the mad part. You love that shelf. You love it more than the flawless, perfectly straight, professionally built shelf sitting in the shop for the exact same money. Offer to swap it for the perfect one, and you'd say no. Offer you £5 to take it off your hands, and you'd get weirdly defensive, like someone just insulted your child. There's a name for this, and it is beautifully honest. It's called the IKEA Effect. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly why your brain treats your own lopsided handiwork like a priceless antique. And more usefully, how that same glitch quietly gets you to overpay for things and hoard stuff you should have binned years ago. So let's actually name what's happening. The IKEA effect is a simple, slightly embarrassing rule of the human brain. The more effort we pour into making something, the more we value it, usually way past what it's actually worth to anybody else on earth. Labor leads to love. You didn't just get a shelf, you got a shelf you bled for, and the bleeding is precisely why it feels priceless. It's named after the flat-pack furniture giant for the obvious reason. Nobody frames a receipt, but people genuinely get attached to the bookcase they spent a sweaty afternoon swearing at. Allen key in hand. One mysterious leftover screw they've decided to just not think about. And this is not me guessing at how people feel. It's a real published finding, and the researchers went to gloriously nerdy lengths to prove it. In 2012, 3 behavioral scientists, Michael Norton, Daniel Mochon, and a name you might remember from last time, Dan Ariely, published a paper with, frankly, the best title in the history of science, The IKEA Effect, When Labor Leads to Love. And they didn't just theorize it over a coffee, they ran experiments, 4 of them. In one, they had people assemble a plain IKEA storage box and then asked how much they'd pay to own it. In another, people folded origami, little paper frogs and cranes, which were then auctioned off. In another, Lego. And every single time the result was the same, and the same amount of ridiculous. The people who built the thing themselves valued it far higher than the people who were simply handed the identical finished object. In the origami study, the folders reckoned their own crumpled little paper frogs were worth about as much as ones folded by an actual expert. An expert. Meanwhile, outsiders looking at the exact same amateur frogs saw them for precisely what they were, a sad bit of squashed paper, and priced them at basically nothing. The builders had what the researchers essentially described as blindness to how genuinely rubbish their creations were. Because they'd made them, sweat turned straight into value, right there in front of the scientists. But here's the twist that makes this properly useful rather than just funny. And it's the bit almost nobody ever mentions. The love only shows up if you finish. In the same research, when people started building something and then got stopped halfway before they could complete it, the magic just vanished. No extra value, no attachment, nothing. It turns out effort on its own doesn't create love. Completed effort does. The half-built wardrobe that's been sitting in the spare room for 8 months with 3 panels still in the box, your brain feels absolutely nothing for it. But the wardrobe you finished, doors on, even the slightly squint one, that one you'd run into a burning building for. So it's not the sweat, it's the sweat plus the finish line, which is a slightly lovely thing to know about yourself. And if you happen to be a company that sells things, an absolute gift. Because here's what the clever companies worked out long before the scientists ever gave it a name. If they can get you to do some of the work, you'll value the result more, and happily pay more for the privilege of doing their labor for them. Sit with that for a second. Flat-pack furniture is cheaper for them to ship flat, sure, but you also walk out loving a bookcase that you built, when what actually happened is you did unpaid assembly work, and then thank them for the opportunity. Meal kits, the box of pre-measured ingredients and a little recipe card, cost more than just buying the same ingredients yourself, and a fortune more than a ready meal. So what's the extra money for? The chopping. You are paying a premium to do the cooking, and you feel like a proper chef at the end of it, proudly plating up something you made, when in reality, a company posted you a jigsaw of vegetables. Build-A-Bear. You pay extra to stuff your own teddy. The child does the labor, The parent pays for the labor, and everyone leaves thrilled with a bear that costs about 3 times a shop one. It is the IKEA effect turned into an entire business model. Even the self-checkout. You're now doing the cashier's job for free, and somehow we've all just quietly agreed that's normal. Stamp some assembly required on a box and you've magically turned a chore into a feature people will pay extra to perform. Now for the bit that costs you the most, long after you've handed over the money. We've talked before on this channel about the sunk cost trap. How you keep pouring money into something purely because you've already spent money on it, not because it's still worth it. The classic, I've paid for the gym so now I'm legally obliged to go and be miserable move. Well, the IKEA effect is sunk cost's sneakier cousin. Same trap, but the currency isn't money, it's sweat. You can't let go of things you built, because letting go feels like admitting all that effort was wasted. That is exactly why your loft is full. The bench you made that nobody has ever once sat on. The garden project that's now mostly weeds. The wonky shelf. You are not keeping these because they're useful. You're keeping them because you made them, and binning them feels like binning a little piece of an afternoon you're never getting back. All that decluttering advice tells you to ask, does this spark joy? But the genuinely honest question for half of your junk drawer is, did I make this? And is that the only reason it's still in my house? Quick one. If you've just glanced guiltily at something in your own home that you built, can't really use, and will absolutely never, ever throw away, do us a favor and hit like, and send this to the person you live with who has a shed, a garage, or a loft full of half-finished projects. Gently, lovingly. It genuinely helps the channel more than you'd think. Right, because knowing why you overvalue your own sweat is one thing. Not getting quietly fleeced by it is the actually useful part. So how do you use this thing instead of letting it use you? And this matters. The IKEA effect is not the enemy here. It's kind of wonderful. It's why building your own stuff makes you happier with less. It's why I made this beats I bought this every single time. The goal is not to stop loving what you build. The goal is to stop it emptying your wallet and burying your home. 3 moves. No psychology degree required. Move 1. When a company asks you to do the work, ask who the work is actually for. Am I building this flat pack because I genuinely enjoy it? Or because I've been quietly recruited as unpaid labor and then charged for the pleasure? If you honestly love the build, brilliant, that's real value, crack on and enjoy it. But if you're doing it resentfully at 11 o'clock at night with a diagram that appears to be for a different product entirely, you are simply working an unpaid shift for a furniture company. Move 2. When you're working out what something you made is worth, to sell it, to keep it, to argue with someone about it, pretend, just for a second, that a total stranger made it instead of you. Would that stranger's version be worth what you think yours is? That one mental swap strips the sweat premium straight out and shows you the real number. Your homemade whatever is almost certainly worth less than you feel it is, and that's completely fine. You already got paid in the joy of making it. That was the payment. Move 3, and this is the one for your overflowing loft. To decide whether to keep something you built, ask, would I buy this today, finished, for what it would cost? If a stranger were selling your exact wonky shelf at a car boot sale for a $5, would you actually hand over the $5? If the answer is a horrified little no, then the only thing keeping that shelf in your house is a puddle of sweat that dried up years ago and that nobody else can even see. Let it go. The afternoon's already gone. The shelf isn't holding onto it for you. So, back to that wonky shelf. It's still leaning very slightly to the left. The T still wobbles. But now you know exactly why you love it. Not because it's good, but because you made it, you finished it, and your brain quietly filed one sweaty afternoon under priceless. And genuinely, that's fine. Keep the shelf, love the shelf, it's earned its place. Just don't let the very same glitch talk you into paying triple to assemble your own sofa, or into hoarding a loft full of things whose only real value is the effort nobody but you can see. Love what you make, just always know what it's actually worth. There's a new one of these every week, quietly pulling apart another little trick your own brain plays on your money. So subscribe. And next time, why you'll happily wave a card and hand over 40 quid without feeling a single thing, but peeling off the very same 40 in real, physical cash feels like having a tooth pulled. Same money, completely different pain. Your wallet is going to want to know about that one.